Welcome to Armanino's webinar, Managing Job Cost Risk in the Construction Industry. Before we get started, we have just a few Zoom webinar tips to help you engage with our speakers today. First of all, you should locate on your Zoom webinar toolbar, there is the Q&A box where you can enter a question at any time throughout the webinar, and we will do our best to answer them at the end as well. And if we don't get a chance to, we'll certainly reach out to you. If anytime you have any issues with the webinar, go ahead and click on that chat button and I'll be here to help you out. My name is Kim Anselmo and I'll be managing the webinar today. So again, too, if you have any issues, go ahead and click that raise hand button as another option and I'll come out and I'll help you with anything you need. To ensure you have some good speaker audio, there is a mute button icon. You can click on that and adjust your audio at any time if it's not working the way you want to. When you click on the audio options, it'll open up the test speaker button, and you can then change the formula for what you're listening to, and that should work better for you as a different option. So with that, let's go ahead and get introduced to our presenters today. We have Scott Stafford, who is a partner with Armanino. Ryan Prindeville, also a partner with Armanino, and then Scott Brandt, who is an audit partner with BSW, Brown Smith and Wallace. So with that, I'll hand it over to Scott, Ryan, and Scott.
All right, thanks, Kim. Appreciate it. Good day, everyone. Appreciate you joining us today. Just a little bit about myself. As Kim said, I am an audit partner with Armanino. I sit in our Dallas office, and one of the roles I play for the firm is I head up our construction practice. Started my career 24 years ago with what was a big six firm at the time and their real estate group, and just got immersed into real estate and construction, and working with construction contractors, GCs, subs, across just about any trade you can name. Right out of the gate in my career, and just always really enjoyed the space, and look forward to talking with you today. And with that, Ryan, would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hey there, everybody. Ryan Prindeville, partner in consulting here at Armanino. So I'm the odd one out. I'm not an audit partner, but I get the pleasure of working with the two Scotts here and facilitating the panel today to talk a little bit about this interesting topic. Long history of walking the line between management consulting and advisory consulting, as well as technology consulting, and look forward to having a discussion.
Thanks, Ryan. So I'm Scott Brandt. I'm an audit partner at Brown Smith Wallace. I've been with the firm today, actually, is my 17th year at the firm. So been able to work with this firm for a long time. And for those of you who don't know, our firm is merging with Armanino effective 8/1. So about 5 days from now, I'll officially be a partner at Armanino, and super excited about what this venture is going to hold for us, and joining forces with Scott here in the construction group and continue to serve our construction clients.
Congratulations, Scott, on your anniversary, and welcome aboard.
Thank you.
So what we thought we would do for an agenda today is a few kind of three key areas. One, learn some best practices around job cost reporting, and really think about enabling collaboration between finance and production teams. Second key bullet there is improving the visibility to data and what the effect that has on your job schedules, and how can we improve your processes overall. And then the third key thing we're going to talk about is making the right decisions related to data in your business, and how does that improve your overall business performance. So with that, let's maybe jump into the next slide here. And the first question I have, let's start with you, Scott Stafford. We wanted to talk a little bit about best practices for job cost reporting, and maybe talk to us a little bit about the roles of the project manager and the finance team, and how they work together and how they're dependent on one another.
Yeah, you bet. So when we talk about job cost risk and job cost management, at the end of the day, what we're really talking about is profitability, and making sure that your business has best practices in place around identifying job cost risks and bringing them to the forefront and addressing them. And as Ryan mentioned, in in the world of construction, your finance team, your accounting team cannot effectively do job level reporting without the production team, without the project managers. One of the key elements of job cost reporting or job profitability reporting is your estimated cost to complete, which, as the name implies, is how much cost you think you've got from that day until your crew is done and the job is complete. You were receiving your retainage, client has accepted the work. And your finance team really is dependent upon your project managers, your leadership within your production team for that information. Nobody has a better feel for where you're at in job costs and how much, again, there remains to complete outside of your production team. So whenever you've got two or more stakeholder groups involved in a process, not surprisingly, what is really, really key is communication. Work with a lot of construction companies, worked with a lot of them through the years, and that experience has definitely allowed me to kind of see organizations that work really well in this regard and some that are struggling with it. And the numbers will usually indicate that, because you can look at profitability, job margins from one company to the next, and you can see where a company is struggling. And when you start digging into that, you really quickly kind of, it's very common that you run into the finance teams and the production teams are not talking. They're not communicating. So from a best practices standpoint, it's really, really important, in my view, to get the key stakeholders in this process together and communicating and collaborating, on a regular basis. And so those key stakeholders are obviously your finance team, and it needs to be senior members of all of these groups. You know, the folks with some experience, the folks maybe with some gray hair or used to have hair like I did and don't have it anymore. So you know, you don't need to put the junior level people in the room. This discussion is just too important, and it really needs experience at the table. So again, senior members of your finance team, senior members of your production team, as well as your C-suite. And it's really important that all of these stakeholders are vested in this discussion. They're vested in this meeting. I definitely have seen companies that get these people together. They get them together on a regular basis. But, you know, maybe one of the key stakeholders in the room, 80% of the time messing around on their phone, 10% of the time they're looking out the window, and maybe 10% of the time they're engaged in the discussion. And that's going to undermine the process. So just got to get all the key stakeholders together. They've got to be vested in the meeting, and understanding how important their role is. Finance cannot do their job without production. It's as simple as that. And then what's also really important when you get everybody together is make sure you're all talking a common language. A lot of times, you know, in these meetings, finance teams kind of got their vocabulary. The production teams are going to show up with their vocabulary, and you can have a lot of misunderstanding just because you're not really all on the same page with the vernacular that you're using. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. It can be related to an area as complex as how revenue recognition and therefore profitability really work for a construction company, or something that may seem as simple as when the project is done. So you get all these key stakeholders together. You really need to make sure you're on a common language when you sit down to walk through the job schedule. And that's really the process, is to start with the first job on the job schedule that's in progress, and have a thorough discussion of that job, where it's at, an analysis of where we stand in the costs compared to budget, how much we've got left to complete the job from a cost standpoint compared to budget, and really lean into any discrepancies, any variances, any anomalies that you see in that data, things where people just don't understand, or you've got an indicator popping out that maybe the job's in trouble. We're going to talk more about that later as well. So education is also important, and being an audit guy, I think it's, the finance teams, from my perspective, generally they have an understanding of the finance, and the production guys necessarily, though, may not. You don't want your finance guys going out and swinging the hammers on the job site. You probably don't want the production guys coming into the office and putting together the financial statements. But it's important that they both understand each other and they understand their role in that overall process. And PMs especially, again, they really got to understand that without being vested in this process and without really bringing forward some thoughtful analysis of where you stand in the job, how much cost you've got left, you're just going to get bad data into the process, and you're going to get bad data out of the process, which is obviously undermines the entire process. So that's not the goal. So
maybe
education.
Stafford, maybe I'm going to ask you to pause there for a sec. Scott
Sure.
Brandt, you're an auditor also. I'm the consulting guy. I work in process and technology all the time, and I see the need to continuously improve and to build ongoing improvements. Do you see it? Is this something you see in your daily life as well with your clients, that is a significant risk for organizations where the project manager's input isn't taken into the finance and accounting plans and actions?
Oh, absolutely. There's a couple of things I've seen over time with project managers holding back information and the finance team just not having the information. We walked out during interim one time during field work, and the company was they told us we're going to make $3 million this year. And we came back at the end and they told us, a month later, they said, we're going to lose $2 million this year because there was $5 million of invoices sitting on this project manager desk that nobody knew about.
Right.
That's a huge difference in change in scope when it came to the audit side and trying to address those things. So it absolutely happens. And, I got another client that has sort of what I'll call a liaison between the finance team and the project management team. So this person was part of the finance team. She developed great relationships with all the project managers, which I don't think we've emphasized enough yet, but that relationship and that team building aspect between the two, knowing that we're all on the same team here, we're all up for the same company, we're all looking for the same goals and the outcomes. She was able to bridge that gap between the two and make the communication work. She understood what the jargon was. She understood what the finance team was looking for, what information they wanted, and she was able to communicate between the two. And it's been successful for that company to set up that designated person that everybody knows they can go to if they've got to facilitate communication between the groups.
So I heard you both talk a little bit about this significant dependency that's there between the project management teams and finance teams, but also the fact that there's oftentimes a communication gap between the two in terms of the terminology, the semantics, and even just the frequency and so forth that we see. So those are major risks that a CFO, a controller, I see a lot of them here on listening in today, can affect. Do you both see projects being defined as being done? What does done, quote unquote, mean on a project, and do the teams define it the same way?
No, never. And you can see that coming up in projects fade, or when we come back the subsequent year, we're starting to look at what happened after year end, and this job shown is 100% complete on the job schedule, yet there's still costs coming in after the fact, and we come up with here's 30,000, here's 60,000, and they can get substantial at some time. So is the job done from the perspective of the project manager? Has his team effectively completed what they're assigned to do and moved on somewhere else? Yeah, probably. But does that mean the finance team has gotten all their ducks in a row too? Have we recorded all the costs? Is there anything else coming from a subcontractor or from a vendor? Are there change orders that might be coming through? Have we billed out everything? Have we collected all the money? Have we paid all the money out? From the finance team perspective, done may not be done until all the cash has come in the door and all the cash has gone out the door related to that project.
Right.
So I think there's one thing I think about with this is two teams sitting down and having a discussion about done and defining what does done mean for each of us. And we have a done checklist, if you will, that we want to kind of make progress towards. And if we can, here are the 4 or 5, key factors that the project managers are considering when done. And here's what accounting needs to look for to determine when they see the job is being done. Put that checklist together and then use that as a tool with these weekly meetings or bi-weekly or monthly, whatever they happen to be, when the teams are sitting together and talking about it. And let's look at that checklist and say, are we done yet? Have we done all these things yet or not? And if it's not, then let's not show the job 100% complete. Let's hold back a little bit. Maybe it's 98% complete, and we got a little bit of things that are coming through yet.
Scott Brandt, I think you brought up a key point there, and done is a definition, but it's also about having a set of dialogue and a communication around the expectations, right? And my suspicion is, and what I've seen, and I think what I'm hearing both of you say that you've seen is that communication about expectations and about what is needed to define done and to say, rubber stamp it as done, probably happens less frequently than it needs to occur, right? And
Right.
What those expectations are, what those needs are. Is there a role that the CFO, the controller, the finance accounting department, maybe their partner like ourselves in an audit role or even a consultant role can help there to facilitate that conversation?
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity there. I think, given our experience with working with both sides, we talked to project managers during the audit, we talked to the accounting side as well, trying to at least facilitate a discussion between the two. And here's all the things we need to consider from ultimately an accounting side, if we want to get accurate financial information, accurate reports out the door, kind of bridging that gap between the two. We've done education roles before where we've gone in and explained the WIP schedule to a project manager, the whole team, just so they understand kind of here's all the bits and pieces, here's where they come into play with providing information. Here's where the accounting team comes into play with providing information, and how that master work in progress schedule all comes together based upon input by all parties.
Yeah, Scott, I think you nailed it with the word education. I touched on that. I think there's definitely a role where we can help an organization, exactly to your point, sit down with production teams and help educate them on their role within this overall financial reporting process. Job cost reporting process, job profitability process. You touched on the scenario where you've got a bunch of invoices sitting in the PM's drawer, and those show up later, and it changes the profitability to the business to a loss, and that happens. And when that happens, nobody is happy. Your surety's not happy. Your owners are definitely not happy, and so we've talked about the key stakeholders that have to show up. They have to be, understand their roles, be educated in that. They have to be talking the same language, and they've got to be humble. They've got to be humble enough to say, hey, we're overrunning on this job, and not be afraid to do that. And I'll tell a very quick story. I worked with a construction company where the founder of the company had been trying to retire, been trying to back out of the day-to-day. And the profitability of the business started suffering when he did that. And he got really unhappy with what was happening. And so he showed back up and he said, we're going to get all these key stakeholders together. We're going to go through this WIP schedule line item by line item, and I'm going to be in the room. And I mean, he told me that, when he knew the business well enough to know when somebody was holding something back. And he was definitely the personality type that was not afraid to hold somebody accountable in the moment. And that's what you have to, like you said earlier, Scott, everybody's on the same team. They're all after the same goal. And that is really, really critical to the process.
I like that. And I'll just summarize it. What I'm hearing you say is that nine times out of 10, what we see is that the project manager, the CFO, the controller, all have the same goals. They want to have a profitable project. They want to have a good outcome, but we see communication gaps, setting expectation gaps, and clarity in terms of needs that need to be addressed up front. And that set of communication can make can be the difference between a successful project and an unsuccessful project. Part of it is just defining what is needed, right? To define what is done. What does done mean? So with that, why don't we jump to the next segment here, our next topic, which is really around technology and improving data visibility, and why is that important? And I'm going to go back and have both the Scotts put their auditor hats on and say, when we look at a company and we're asked to come in and evaluate what's going on, what are the things that we typically see at a construction company that maybe are some of those risks, some of those red flags that we should be thinking about here?
Yep. So everything we talked about so far has involved getting stakeholders together and discussing the WIP schedule, the job schedule, going line item by line item. And you absolutely have to have the right technology platform to produce an accurate job schedule to facilitate that discussion. If you get those key stakeholders together and they're looking at bad data, it's going to undermine the process right out of the gate. And so your technology stack, what financial reporting system you're on, is really, really critical to facilitating the best practice of these meetings. So what I typically see is there is an accounting system. A lot of times it's QuickBooks. A lot of times it's what I'm going to refer to as a legacy Sage product. It's Sage 100 or 300 or something similar. It's an old Timberline essentially. We see that a lot. Beyond it, it's not uncommon that we will also see some form of a project management tool, software platform like a Procore. And I mean, quite honestly, that is what I think is probably most typical. That's the beginning, middle, and end of it, is those kind of two type of solutions in place. And when you look at the job schedule, number one, if you're in QuickBooks, we said this in last month's webinar, if you're on QuickBooks, it does not produce a job schedule. You cannot maintain it within the system. So you've got one arm tied behind your back right out of the gate. If you are on a legacy Sage product or something similar where it is producing a job schedule, I mean, in all honesty, a lot of times when we get that job schedule, we'll look at it and there are issues that just leap off the page at you. I'll use something as simple as the total billings on the WIP schedule are in excess of the contract value in the WIP schedule, right? So maybe the contract just needs to be updated for some change orders, but I mean, it's something as obvious as that. And so what that tells us is, okay, you've got a technology solution that can produce a WIP schedule, but you don't have a good process underneath the WIP schedule itself. And then in the WIP schedule, you'll see I say what's most typical is you see very bare bones information: contract value, total billings, cost incurred to date, cost to complete, estimated profitability. And those things are all extremely important, but the best practices I've seen where people have really invested in the technology solution and tool, with the WIP schedules they're producing also include information around anticipated project start date, anticipated project completion dates, the budget for the job, budget to actual reporting, things that really help facilitate the discussions that we talked about earlier. The opportunity is there. I said this a lot in June. It's become a mantra of mine. You would not send your crews out into the field without the tools they need to get the work done. But very typically we see companies asking their finance teams to do their job without the tools they need. They're on a system that doesn't even support the basis of accounting that you're on, doesn't facilitate job cost reviews, or it's 15 years old. It's antiquated.
So Scott Brandt, is Scott Stafford crazy, or is this what you're seeing too with your clients? And and you said you've been playing in the space for 17, 18 years. Mm-hmm. Are you seeing the same things?
Well, we know Stafford's crazy, but as it relates to this issue, I think he's spot on. I mean, what he was talking about in terms of the systems that our construction clients have in place, you're right. QuickBooks isn't going to cut it. There's better information out there. Even some of these legacy systems that have been around for a long time, they work, but there's still a lot of manual process going on, and there's still a lot of information that needs to be pulled from several different sources rather than having a nice summary complete report all in one. If you could picture your perfect system, it's pulling all this information from the estimating to the budgets to the change orders, bring it all together in one spot. and give me a summary, executive summary, if you will. If you can find a system that is capable of that, that'd be pretty impressive. But yeah, you get a lot of times where you're trying to pull information from a bunch of different spots and making sure that information relies. And again, it's a manual process, and inherently that creates mistakes, the opportunity for mistakes.
So maybe to both of you, what do we think the opportunity here for construction companies is? What do we wish that they would pay more attention to in the situation, given that many are underinvested in technology? And I like Stafford's point about, we're sending a team out maybe without the tools they need to do the job, and the job is getting more complex. From what I'm hearing you both say is, the job hasn't gotten easier over the years. It's actually gotten more complex with the types of things that both the finance teams and the project management teams are facing.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we wish they would be doing?
Yeah, I mean, as simply as I can say it, what I consider a best practice, and what I would love to see all of my construction clients do, is understand the value of the investment in data and in the systems that they need to produce the data. It takes an investment. And again, people are usually not shy about pulling the trigger on something that's needed out on the job site, but sometimes key stakeholders can struggle to understand the value of data and of the technology. The other thing I would really love to see all of my clients do is take a holistic view to the opportunity that is there with technology. Very early on in my career, I ran into a construction company that basically didn't have an accounting system and just brought me a cardboard box full of receipts. But beyond that one instance, every company I've run into has got an accounting system, but that is usually where it stops. And like we talked about earlier, it's pretty limited outside of that in terms of the technology that they employ in managing the business and producing data to manage the business off of. Technology is just, it transforms itself every 3 years. If you're a Silicon Valley company, you don't reinvent yourself every 3 years, you're dead in the water. That's about the same with your accounting, any technology solution that you're using in your business. So again, sitting back and taking a holistic view. There's CRM systems, there are project management systems, there are accounting systems, there are estimation systems. There are platforms that talk to each other. They're integrated. They push information back and forth. They can take the job estimate and push and create a budget. The budget can create procurement orders or the procurement process. There's a lot of opportunity to build a holistic IT ecosystem. And the last thing I'll say, and Scott, you can share some of your thoughts, is kind of just to get back to people understanding the importance of the investment. That has to be led from the top. Mm-hmm. It has to be the C-suite. It has to be the ownership on down, pushing and acknowledging this stuff is important. This is an area that as a business and as an organization we're going to invest in and hold people accountable to.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of those same things, Scott. It's difficult to change people's mind when it comes to doing something different. And if I've always built a building this way, or I've always ran electrical wires through in this way, and this is what's required, this is what has to be done, it's hard to implement change when it comes to that if there's no reason to change or you can't see the benefit of changing. So my advice to people is kind of, constantly look for ways to improve and reflect back on what have we done well in the past and where were we efficient in jobs, and take that information and knowledge and sort of transfer it forward and look back at what caused problems to occur and how do we prevent those from happening in the future. Is it certain types of jobs, certain locations of jobs? Maybe it's performance of the labor, the people that were assigned to it. Maybe there's some consistent themes there. I think having that all that data information in a way to kind of summarize and look at that information as from a learning perspective is something that I'm not sure we reflect upon enough, because it's always hard to go back when we've got this backlog that has to continue to get done day after day, and it's always easier just let's go on to the next project. but not necessarily learn from the past. And I think that's where we can uncover certain things that may have come up and help you become more efficient. That's where the technology comes into play. That's where we see the benefit from it, by having these systems that are in place to be able to analyze this data a little bit better.
It's interesting.
Kind of,
I was going to say, it's interesting, Scott, Brant, and Stafford, hearing you both talk and thinking about this a little bit, is that I think there's also a sub thread that you guys are both hitting on, but maybe a little bit adjacent. Is we talked about communication, we talked about roles and expectations, we talked about technology enabling your business and so forth. But there's also, I'm curious, with the competitiveness in recruiting right now and talent, one of the main risks I hear you guys talk about a lot is the lack of quality talent that our clients sometimes have in terms of their ability to recruit their accounting staff and so forth. And that can actually play into or be affected by the technology as well, right? Meaning that as we get to the next generations, this millennial, Gen Z and beyond probably aren't, if you have your choice of companies to work for in accounting, and you're a CFO or a controller trying to recruit this next generation, which types of firms are they going to want to work with, right? The ones that are behind the times, not communicating, don't have the tools and platforms, or the ones who have invested and are investing in this as well. So it becomes part of that almost generational planning of your company as well. Do you see that?
Absolutely. There's no question about it. And we see it in our own business, but I certainly see it out at my construction clients. I think you're spot on. The kids that have been, and I'll call them kids, the kids have been graduating, with their accounting degrees for the last 5, 6, 7 years even. They grew up with a phone in their hand. They grew up in a virtual world, just about. They're very, very comfortable. They're very, very adept with technology, and it influences their worldview a lot. And so I think when you come in to an environment where you've got these manual bridges between systems, a lot of manual data entry into an Excel spreadsheet to get something done, that's going to be a major turnoff. I can guarantee it. They're going to see that as really inefficient and not a good use of their time and not a good use of their talent. And if I can just real quick expand on that concept of time, we talked about the importance of getting all the right stakeholders together, getting them in front of the job schedule and having that detailed line item by line item discussion of where we're at on the job, where we're at on job costs. They're interdependent on each other, and your profitability and your ability to avoid margin fade, your ability to avoid upsetting the bank and avoid upsetting your sureties is dependent on that process being effective. Those are some really important people to your business. Their time is very, very valuable, and it's usually the thing that is one of the frequent barriers that you see is I don't have time to get everybody pulled into this. I don't have time for people to be vested in this. Well, I can guarantee you that if you take the time to get those people together and you sit them down in front of a job schedule that's got issues like what I described, things that are just obvious busts because either your technology is just antiquated, it's behind, you're having to put the thing together manually, you're limping down the road with it, you've now wasted people's time. And that will undermine this process quicker than anything. So this technology stack and being taking advantage of the opportunities that technology represents to get good data in, to be able to slice and dice the data, visualize the data in different ways, to create the dashboards to drive these discussions, it's really, really important. It's just really important, in my opinion.
Yeah, you're right. The time aspect, you had a key point there in my mind. It is figuring out how to create more time. Because we never have enough time in a day. It feels like there's always something else we could do or to kind of continue on. There's always a backload of information. It never really goes away. But how can you become more efficient in what you're doing? How can you use technology to your advantage to try to create more time so you are doing something that does provide more value versus just compiling information? Automate as much as you can and then figure out where you can come up with more time. Nobody wants to work 16-hour days anymore. Keep it at 8 and go home and enjoy the family. If anything's taught us that the last year and a half has, I think, with this work-life balance situation, that work-life, I call it integration more than anything, because you walk from your bed to your desk while on these remote worlds. So it's a little bit more challenging that way, but there's a way to be able to provide more time, and it's becoming more efficient than having that mindset as a company, that we're constantly looking to improve and get better, and then challenge people for those ideas, promote those ideas. That starts at the top. I've seen companies that have given out incentives for best idea for improvement, best ideas that have come up on the floor, best ideas that have come out in the warehouse, on the job, whatever it might be, and those work. They're cost savings to the company, and they're time savings to people, and people feel valued then when they can kind of provide that input too to management and make some other decisions as well.
Scott Brandt, that's a really interesting topic, and it kind of circles it back too, is that we think about the expectations, the communication, the rewards, the recognition, and so forth, and getting people involved. It also it does kind of tie back to that retention and recruiting and so forth as well, is because if people feel valued, you're valuing their time and their inputs and so forth. You're giving them the tools for to be successful in their job. They're probably going to have a higher level of value for that they feel you are putting them in a position to contribute to the organization as well, right?
Right.
So it's a two-way street there, is putting people in a position to be successful, listening to their feedback points, and then enabling them to help you achieve the organization's goals at the same time. So it becomes kind of a cycle, right?
Yep.
That's great. Well, why don't we jump into the next topic then? And this next one is really about, we talked about some of these earlier, and then we talked about how we could make it feel better as well. But what are some of those screaming red flags? You both have been auditing and working with construction companies for a long time, and have seen a lot of things, and your teams have seen a lot of things. What are some of those screaming red flags that you've seen that you would want to make sure all of our clients and friends of the firm are aware of, and that they know they need to address?
So I think one thing we've talked a couple of times about is profit margin fade, and if with not having the right systems in place, not the right communications, not the right controls in place, that margin fade could occur, and chances are it's going to occur, and chances are that the results that the finance team is putting out there on a monthly basis, they could change and fall back in the future because of that risk that's out there. We typically see a lot of jobs that might be in a large overbilling or underbilling situation. Overbilled jobs, could this be an indication of a cash flow concern, where we're constantly billing ahead on jobs to kind of pay for other jobs that it may not be going as well? Could there be a profit deferral? Are we sandbagging a little bit, maybe? Not to use that, using that term a little loosely, but that happens. We like to call it managing expectations for the outside providers. So we're holding back a little profit, and I guess for the unseen or the unknown, but it also could just be an indication that we haven't all the costs haven't been properly captured for what we billed for either, to get in that large overbilling position. Now, on the flip side, the underbilling side, it could be as simple as, is there a billing opportunity here? Did we miss billing something out for a cost we've incurred? Or are we incurring more costs than what we initially expected, and we should be starting to talk to the client about a change order? That's a possibility too. Maybe there was something going on that was different from scope, that we need to be compensated for that work. We got to make sure that it all plays into having the right information at hand, being able to have the conversation and kind of reconcile between the two.
Well, I was going to say, Scott Brandt, that's interesting, because all of these red flags, and as you check in, and I know Stafford's going to go into a few more of them, they definitely reflect the needs and the issues that we saw earlier, right? I mean, they're reflected by the need for communication, the need for expectation setting, the need for better systems, access to data, visibility, and having the right people in the right place, right? And so as we go through these, I'm sure they're all related.
100%. And we talked about early on, the process, the communications, having the right stakeholders. We've talked about having the right technology stack to be able to produce the data that they need in that meeting and for it to be accurate and not a waste of people's time. Okay, well, now you got them all together, you got good data. How do you use the data? And to just reinforce a few things that Scott Brandt said, you know, one of the things when I get a job schedule that I'll look for when it comes to job cost risk, when it comes to job margin fade risk, is I look at where are our jobs, where our cost, we're in a significant underbilling position. We're in a significant cost in excess of billings position. Those are just red flags to me that those are jobs where are at risk for margin fade. Our costs are running hot. Now, maybe it's just a simple issue of billing timing, but maybe we have a bad estimate, or maybe we're incurring overages on this job we didn't anticipate when we put the estimate together. So we've got some change orders we need to be leaning into with the customer so that we can get this job right-sized from a profitability standpoint. Again, those are just red flags. You see those costs running hot. Those costs are running in excess of billings. And that also screams for cash flow crunch, right? We're incurring a lot of costs that are ahead of our billings. So we could have a liquidity crunch that comes out of these jobs. So, you know, if you're a construction company that has 200 open jobs at one time, you get all these stakeholders together, it's going to be impossible unless all they do all day, every day is walk through line item by line item to go through those 200. So this is one of the ways to kind of filter that data set. Where are my costs running hot? Where are they in excess of billings? And then look everybody in the eye and say, what's going on in this job? You know, it's not just a simple issue of billing timing. Was it a bad estimate? Are we running hot on the job site? Are there overage opportunities? Are there change order opportunities? Those are just really important discussions to have and kind of screaming red flags. One of the other things that I do is I make sure I have an understanding of what the historical actual margin experience is for this customer, for this client, for this company. And then I look for outliers. So if historical average actual margins are 20%, I'll look for anything that's throwing out under 15 or over 25, you know, over either way. I mean, if it's running really, really well or it's running really, really poorly, just understanding what do we typically finish at? And what is this data telling us? You know, if it's running hot in terms of costs and the margin looks low, again, same conversation as I was just talking about. But if the margin's looking really good, and I can tell you from an auditor standpoint, that's definitely one of the things I look at. I know this company usually does 20% margin, and this job over here is saying 37%. What did they forget? What you know, I go straight to that estimated cost to complete number, and I want to dig into that because I want to understand why this job is going to be such an outlier compared to their historical experience. Chances are you got a bad estimate number and that estimated cost to complete. Maybe not, but there's a strong chance that you do. So that's how to use that data once you have it. And, you know, like we talked about, you got to have all the right stakeholders in the room looking at the data to be able to have those discussions.
Yeah, we've done that on audits where you pull, here's your normal 25% margin and then go up 10% and down 10%. And that's a pretty normal range, you know, based on history with that particular client. And then we hit them up hard on the outliers. It's all about the outliers when it comes to that. And why is this one so much higher? What is different about this job versus the rest of them? It's going to allow you to make 45% versus 25% when you bid it out at 25% on average. So there's one flag on here that I don't think we hit on quite yet about the incentives, and you know, we talked a little bit about this in terms of aligning company goals with people's goals and all that. And sometimes you see where those goals don't quite line up, and you got in sales incentive goals or project manager incentive goals based upon selling work for gross dollars only, and not considering, well, there's got to be a margin on that too to fund overhead and cover your overhead costs. So are they incented to sell jobs at 10% versus 25% because the 10% is just, I'm going to get more stuff in the door selling at cheaper prices, and that's going to increase my commission and my pay? Or are we incented, you know, a different way of looking at it too is if every job that I work as a project manager that exceeds 15% profit margin, I get a commission off of. Well, that's great. But if I've got a lot of jobs that I'm working on, and I got some that are falling at 25% and some that are falling at 10%, it creates a little bit of pressure and incentive for me to be able to shift some of that cost from that 25 down to that 10 to bring the 10 up, so now it qualifies for commission. So to the extent you can make sure that those job estimates, the original estimate and the cost incurred, some kind of control around that process to make sure that if you're going to have a situation like that, that it's being monitored a little bit with the project management team and with how costs are being charged. And second of all, kind of align those goals a little bit better and make sure that the alignment with what the company focus is the same as what the incentive is being paid out to kind of get people to perform at that level.
Yeah, Scott, I think that's a really interesting one, and it's probably underappreciated a lot of times, right? Is that people do and act how they're incented, right?
Yes.
And so if we don't have that alignment up front, yes, Stafford talked about the communication earlier. We talked about setting expectations, but do we need to actually physically look at how people are incented and aligned to make sure that all those expectations are clear throughout the chain are really important. Well, I think this is a really, really important and interesting conversation. Scott, what any closing thoughts here, closing points that you'd like to bring up?
Yeah, I think overall, what I would really encourage my clients to do, and encourage everybody who's called in today, and again, we appreciate your time, to do is to think about what you've heard today. Hopefully it makes sense to you in terms of these things representing best practices, and these practices being effective in addressing job cost risk. You'll be amazed at the conversations that you have. It will lead to conversations about your estimation process, because you'll identify where there's issues there. It will lead to conversations about subs that are ineffective, and so they're not doing a great job. Costs are running hot. You're overpaying the subs. You will lead into all types of operational discussions out of this process. So I would encourage you to sit back and think about what you've heard, particularly around technology. Where am I at in technology compared to what I've heard today? And are there any gaps between where I'm at today and what I've heard could be a best practice for my company? And to the extent that you identify gaps or need some help identifying gaps, reach out and make sure you got the right resources to do that, and make sure you put together a game plan on how you're going to address those gaps.
Yeah, I just want to thank the Armanino team for letting me join today. Again, pretty excited about the merger happening here in about a week, and getting through all that needs to get done before that happens. But I think summarizing up a couple of things we've talked about, getting the right team in place is extremely important, to have the communication, to have the education, and to making sure that teams are functioning the right way so that knowledge share just happens. You don't want to have people holding back information for one reason or another, and the more that can be communicated back between the two, great. And if there's technology information needs to happen to make jobs more efficient, look for those opportunities and understand the value that's associated with that in terms of freeing up people's time and how that time could be used in other manners that are maybe more important or more efficient.
Well, I appreciate both of you and the knowledge you shared. I think there's some great history and some great learnings. Hopefully all of our attendees took away a nugget or two. I took away a few nuggets here. We talk about what can you do. You can evaluate your performance on that on our actual jobs. We can do a gap assessment on our ecosystem. What's working and what's not. Yes, in the technology, but also in the team that's using it, in our communication plan, in our recruiting and retention plans. Are we, like we talked about, are we set up correctly? Are we setting the right expectations? And like Scott Brandt said, do we have the right incentives in place to manage all of that communication and set those expectations as well? Do we have a roadmap for improvement? If we do have some gaps in the things we talked about in our evaluation, our assessment, do we have a roadmap for improvement? And do you know your plan? And maybe more importantly, does your team know your plan? And have you communicated out to them about what you're working on and why you're there? And because if everything's not perfect today, that may be okay if everybody knows that you have a plan to improve it as well. Feel free to reach out to us, any of the three of us, or Kim, or anybody in Armanino anytime, or if you have follow-up questions. And thank you all for your time.
Yes, thank you, Scott and Ryan, for all that information on construction. I want to let everybody know this has been recorded, and we will be sharing it out as well as the PowerPoints afterwards. So thank you for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.